Okay, thank you, Dove, and thank you for for the delivery, Dove. Okay, so Chanukah was thousands of years ago, but in many ways, Chanukah is uniquely similar to our situation today. How would that be, or how might that be? I'm sorry?
We're still fighting the Hellenists.
We're still fighting the Hellenists. Okay. What do you mean?
Democrats.
Let's not get political. Okay.
The threat is
Right?
The threat is assimilation.
Okay, the threat is assimilation. The threat is taking in a culture that is very alluring, that is pervasive, and that welcomes us in. Right? This is a culture that welcomes us in. The Nazis were pretty unique in that a Jew who would become a Hellenist, let's say, in the time of the Greeks, so that he would be accepted with open arms. The Nazis were unique in that there was no escape. There was no way that one could become. So it's a cultural war. Good. Also, let's think that what was unique about Chanukah, right? Normally we take the term exile, galut. And what do we associate the term galut with?
Destruction of the temple.
Destruction of the temple.
A physical location.
A physical location, right? Being in exile. Hi Raj, how are you? Right? Being in exile. Being banished from our land. That's how we normally defined exile. Yet, Chanukah took place when we were there in Israel. Not only were we there in Israel, but the temple was standing. So we have a galut, an exile, when we're in Israel with a Beit HaMikdash, with a temple. So clearly we need to redefine our understanding of exile to a certain degree. And also when we look at ourselves today, again, there is a very strong similarity in that we have the land of Israel, we have a state of Israel, we have independence in our land, in our country. Thank you so much. And yet, we are in Galus, yet we are in exile. So let's see some of the different writings. Ada, right over here. Let's see. Can I get you a sandwich or some? Can I get you a sandwich? Can I get you a sandwich or some soup?
No, thank you.
You're good? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see some of the writings that we have. Some from earlier sources, some from more contemporary sources, and let's see how we can, what we can learn from this, how we can apply this to ourselves. For Rabbi Yitzchak Berkovitz, the striking aspect of celebrating Chanukah each year is the realization that the very same ideological battles that were fought 2,200 years ago, which prompted the Syrian-Greek offensive against the Jewish people, culminating in the Chanukah miracles, are still being waged today, and are poignantly relevant to the life of every Jew. How can this be? Linda, you don't have to be so far away. There's a seat right over here. Please. The Syrian-Greek war against Israel, replete with tank-like elephants and over 100,000 skilled soldiers, seems like an anomaly to Greek philosophy. The Greeks, home to the schools of Plato and Aristotle, sought to systematically understand and classify knowledge of the world. They were primarily intellectuals, not militants. This is more Athens than Sparta? Why would the Syrian Greek army attack the Jewish nation? Israel is not a military threat. The Syrian Greek target was Judaism and Judaism alone. Jews who adopted the Greek worldview, Hellenism, were embraced. Hellenism was certainly a challenge for many Jews attracted to the intellectualism and logic of the Greek culture that postulated that man created religion. Right? Religion, they postulated, is something that mankind needs to reach out to something greater than it. We have this need, so we created religion. Nevertheless, what was so appalling to the Syrian Greeks that they sought to destroy Judaism and her adherents? The Greeks taught that man was the center of the universe. There is no God. One does not look beyond the physical world. It is man who has the need to create God. In contrast, right, so just the physical world, famous quote from the cosmonaut who went up into orbit, and what does he say?
He didn't see God.
He didn't see God. And when they do an autopsy or surgery, what don't they find? They don't find the soul, right? Do not look beyond the physical world. And that is the fallacy of the proofs of God, or the lacks of proofs of God, because you're dealing with a physical world and physical proofs to try to prove something that transcends anything that is physical. In contrast, Judaism teaches that man is almost at the center of the universe. Rather, the primary focus is God, who created, sustains, and guides the universe, creates man with a divine soul, empowers us with the ability and to impact both this world and eternal spiritual worlds that transcend physical existence. So we have a clash of worldviews. The Greeks could not tolerate that the Jewish people lived Judaism as a dynamic reality, which was an affront and threat to Greek thought and culture. 2,200 years later, the Jewish world is still divided between those influenced by Hellenism who view Chanukah and hence Judaism as tradition, something of sentimental value that contributes some meaning to life but ultimately is not real, and in contrast, those who see Judaism as a reality where each action has cosmic implications. So we have a clash. We have Jerusalem and we have Athens. We have the Jewish worldview and we have the Greek Assyrian, the Hellenistic worldview. And it's so interesting that during World War II, Hitler, Yamach Shemo, viewed this as a war against the Jews, against that which Jews had introduced to the world. Right? We pollute the body with circumcision, and we pollute the mind with conscience, with morals. We're talking about, it's always this clash of views. We, the Jewish people, represent, always have and always do, and we represent and we live a world view that shakes the foundations and the underpinnings and the view of the world at large, and therefore instead of dissuade, if he can't dissuade us, then it turns brutal.
Why is that viewed as a threat? Why is the Jewish point of view viewed as a threat?
That's a great question.
Because they clearly view it that way.
Yeah, and I believe whenever there is insecurity, so then one views other views as being a threat. Look at the Soviet Union, right? You had a few Jews who said they wanted to go to Israel, right? And they became the greatest enemies of the state, right? Because they would be undermining the paradise, the workers' paradise that was the Soviet Union, right? When we are undermining the view that they have or that they're trying to portray, then it gets.
You would think that if they felt strongly enough,
That's right.
nothing could threaten it.
That's right.
And it does.
That's right. That's right. And it does. And it does. We are here. It's interesting. The nation of Israel is referred to as the Bechor.
Yeah.
Right? All nations are what we say in Pirkei Avot. Right? Mankind are the children of God, and Israel is called the Bechor, the firstborn. What's strange? What seems incorrect that we're referring to us as the firstborn?
Historically, we didn't necessarily come to that.
Yeah, we weren't the first of the nations. Other nations preceded us. So why would we be referred to as the Bechor? So Rabbi David Foreman says a very, very beautiful thought. The role, a Bechor, the firstborn son, has a very specific role. He has certain benefits that he receives because of the role that he plays. What is the role that he's meant to play? To take the values in the life of the father and bring it into the next generation as an example of how we take father and apply it to the world as it is today. It's no longer father's world. Now it's the next generation. How does father's life, views, morals, values, how does that look in this next generation? With that, we understand that the role of Israel is to take the morals and values of Father, of Hashem, and bring it into this world. But those who have a different view find ours very, very irksome. And it usually turns ugly. We say in the Al Hanisim prayer, source number 2, I didn't number it, I apologize, but source number 2, the bottom of the first page. And this is something that applies to all of our holidays. We say in the Tefillah Al Hanisim, Sha'asita lavoteinu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. That which you did for our fathers in those days at this time. And this is the Sifsei Chaim. This is also a concept that Rav Dessler in Michtav Meliyahu in Strive for Truth speaks about. Kol ha'moedim v'yamim ha'tovim sheyesh lanu einam chagim historiyim lezecher ha'avar shechalaf. We do not commemorate. All of our holidays are not these days, historical days, where we don our pilgrim hats and it's not to remember some historical event that was in those days in his past. El kol ha'yurim ha'yishuot v'hashefa ruchani v'gashmi shaya mitorim u'dchashim midei shana b'zmaneihem. All that happened then, the salvation and the abundance of spiritual and physical blessings are re-established annually at the anniversary of the holiday. I always refer to this as this Epcot world, where you go into a different pavilion. We enter into Rosh Hashanah, and it's not that, on this day Adam was judged. But we understand that we enter the pavilion. We are judged. And Yom Kippur, it's not, on that day Moses came down. Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, with the second Luchot, with a message of forgiveness. But we ourselves we enter that pavilion. We ourselves go through forgiveness. So too with each of the holidays, we re-enter that zone. Pesach is not the day that we left Egypt, but it is Zman Cheruteinu, the day of our freedom. The unique form of divine influence elevation that can be attained during each festival is dependent upon the degree to which one adequately prepares in advance, devoting time to reflect on the essence of the holiday and thus gaining the spiritual strengthening which inevitably follows. So it's here, it's available for us. It was Bayamim Hahem, Bazman Hazeh, right now in our world. But it can come and go and all we do is gain 5-6 pounds of latkes, right? And we carry on. Similarly, this is applicable during Chanukah. As such, we need to understand the essence of the Greek exile in order to awaken ourselves to mend its harmful consequences to us today. By doing so, we'll be able to take advantage of the spiritual freedom which is inherent in the holiday that illuminates this period every year, Bayamim Hahem, Bazman Hazeh, at this time. Here is a nice little timeline which you could refer to as we go through some of the other sources, right? This is a timeline of the Chanukah era. So we're talking about the miracle of Chanukah. Chashmonaim is about 140 BCE, going to 36 BCE, and then once again the Romans took control until the destruction of the temple. Hebrew year 3862, secular year 68. Right? That's common, I call it the common error. Right? Error, yeah. That's what I call it. Okay. The Rambam, in the laws of Chanukah, the Bayit Sheni, during the Second Temple, Kashamalchu Yavan, when the Greeks were ruling Gazru Gezerot al Yisroel, they made decrees over the Jewish people, Ubatlu Datam, to try to destroy our religion. Didn't allow us to study Torah, over mitzvot, and to fulfill mitzvot, to pashti yadav mamonam, and they would steal our assets, uvivinotayim, and their hands were extended to our assets and to our daughters. V'nichnasu leheichal. Right, this was a Jewish girl getting married, had to first go and be with the governor, a complete degradation and defilement of all that is holy. And they entered into the Heichal, into the temple. Upartsuba pratzot, and they broke through there. V'timu atarot, and they defiled that which is pure. V'tsar lehem Yisroel ma'od mipneim, v'lachatzum lachatz gadol, and we were under tremendous hardship and pressure. Ad sherichim aleim elokei avoseinu v'oshiam yadam v'atzilam, until God had compassion on us and saved us from their hands. Right? You know, when we speak about the three cardinal sins, what are the three cardinal sins? Are sins for which one must be willing to give up their life. What are those three cardinal sins?
Idolatry, immorality, such as adultery, and being forced to kill someone.
And murder. Good. Those are the big three. And we say that each of the exiles is aligned with one of them. And the sages say that the Greek exile is aligned with shvichat damim, literally spilling of the blood, we call murder. And we would think that that's not a proper alignment. Because as long as we would assimilate, become Hellenized, then we would be accepted. So why are they compared to murder? So some of the commentators, the Or Gedalia says very beautifully, Shvichat dam literally means spilling blood. Right? When you spill the blood, the external remains, but the inner essence, the life flow, has been drained out. That's exactly what they were about. You can keep your external, but that which makes you as a Jew, that belief system, those practices, your very life spirit, your life flow, that gives you kihem chayenu, this is our life, that is what they wanted to drain out from the Jewish people. Right? They didn't destroy the temple. The Romans destroyed the temple. They didn't destroy the temple. You don't have to destroy the temple. Keep it as a Taj Mahal. Keep it as a beautiful building. But the sacrifices, all that service, all that divine stuff, that that they wanted to suck the blood out from us. Here, to get an idea of the time flow, the next paragraph, the Jewish Study Network, a Chanukah reader. The story behind the Netz of Chanukah begins with the Greek conquest of the kingdom of Judea by the military force of Alexander the Great in 320 BCE. Not content to be mere military conquerors, the Greeks maintained a vision of conquest that extended beyond just physical subjugation. They wanted their culture to dominate the world, and hence always sought to spread its influence within the territories under their control. Long before the actual events of Chanukah took place, Greek culture, Hellenism, started to make itself felt within the Jewish population. Paul Johnson, History of the Jews, the impact of Hellenization on educated Jews was in many ways similar to the impact of the Enlightenment on the 18th century ghetto. Fascinating. Fascinating. When the Psukim speak about the world in its primordial state, we say there was Choshech al Pnei Tahom. And again, different terms there are referring to different exiles. And the Greek exile is referred to as Choshech. What does Choshech mean?
Darkness.
You'd think that they were all about enlightenment, right? And it's similar to what we call in the 18th century, the 19th century, the Enlightenment, right? But when it's enlightenment at the expense of taking out the divinity, the godliness, then it's not illuminating, but it is choshech.
But it's very tantalizing. It's tantalizing because
Sure.
it puts you in charge in a way.
Yes, yes, yes.
Your intellect can rise above the norm.
Correct. That's, yes. The problem is when it's there, when it's unbridled intellect,
Yeah.
we see what it could lead to. It was a destabilizing force spiritually, and above all, it was a secularizing, materialistic force. In response to Hellenization, internal conflict soon arose within the Jewish people as those who favored the new trend confronted those who did not. Eventually, they developed a movement of Jews whose aim it was to force the pace of Hellenization by purging Judaism of those elements that limited the advancement of Greek culture. Jews against Jews. Jews against Jews. The progressive Jews who needed to purge these outdated, anachronistic ways that were an embarrassment to these enlightened Jews. And that's something that sounds very familiar, right? During different times of unrest in Eastern Europe, times of pogroms and massacres, the westernized Jews in Western Europe, right, didn't want those strange-looking, outdated Polish Jews coming in and shaking up the status quo. In the year 175 BCE, those Jewish Hellenizers gained a powerful ally with the ascendancy of Antiochus IV to the throne of the Syrian Greek Empire. Like those before him, Antiochus was disturbed to find the Jews still holding on, stubbornly, obstinately, to their own religion, worshipping their own God in blatant disregard of the Greek deities. To further advance the cause of Hellenization, he issued decrees banning any religious or cultural practices not in line with Hellenism. The observance of Brit Milah. Brit Milah is something that was averse to the whole beauty of the exterior of the human body. Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh. Antiochus was a vicious dictator bent on the destruction of Judaism. Women who circumcised their babies were executed with their dead babies hung around their necks. That's Maccabees 160 to 61. The book of Maccabees is not canonized. It's not part of our Tanakh. It's not part of our scripture in terms of having Ruach HaKodesh, a divine, either written with prophecy or with divine insight. But nevertheless, it serves as a historical record. A special directive was also sent to stop the sacrificial services in the temple. The temple itself in 168 BCE was desecrated and turned into a place where non-kosher animals were offered to the pagan gods. That was the world that we were confronted with, and that we were desperately trying to hold on to who we were and what we were about. The Gemara speaks about my Chanukah, what is Chanukah, and it speaks about the double miracles that took place. That's the miracle of the oil, and mostly the oil, but also speaks about the Chashmonaim defeating the Greeks. How there were a few who stood up and against all odds were able to hold on and to regain the Jewish control there. Let's hear Rabbi Hirsch and his very, very fascinating view on how we were meant to be partners. Yavan and Israel were meant to partner together. In Bereshit, the Torah says, Yaft Elokim liyefet v'yishkon ba'alei shem. I'm on the second page, third side, over here. Sam's going to follow Hirsch. Right across from the timeline, over here. The beauty. Yaft Elokim, God has given Yefet the beauty. Yefet was one of the sons of Noach, out from whom came Yavan, Greece. V'yishkon ba'alei Shem, but let him reside in the tents of Shem. Shem, another one of the sons of Noach, out from whom came Am Yisroel. In Yefet came together reason and the desire for the spiritual. Yefet reaches its peak in the culture of Yavan, Greece. Until today, these two remain, Israel and Yavan, Sinai and humanism, respectively. Yefet beautified the world from an aesthetic point of view, while Shem enlightened the world from an ethical, moral perspective. Yefet prepares the ground for the mission of Shem. First, let a person be imbued with ideas of the beautiful and the good in the spirit of the Greeks, and afterwards let him proceed to be imbued with that which is still more beautiful and elevated and harmonious, the godly. First, learn to have an appreciation, to rise above the animalistic and to appreciate, and then we can go beyond appreciating the aesthetic and the physical to the spiritual. There was a conflict between two perspectives of life, two cultures, which until today are struggling for dominance in the world. The Greek nation stood at the pinnacle of culture of all the descendants of Yefet. The Greeks taught to all other nations the beautiful and explained that that which is beautiful is also good. However, at the pinnacle of the culture of the children of Shem stood Aver, whose descendants became the Hebrew nation, which plants its tents according to the will of Hashem in order to sanctify His name. They build a temple of justice and love. I mean, do you hear? This is Rav Hirsch writing. Rav Hirsch was, of course, in which country? Germany, right? And this is, of course, well before the Holocaust. But when you have this appreciation for the culture, for the aesthetic, when it is unbridled, I mean, there was no country more cultured, more into their opera and poetry and philosophy. The orchestras, the composers, the Germans were the pinnacle. And when you have just that, without there being the elevated, the harmonious, the godly, then without what he called over here the temple of justice and love, then all that culture and all that sophistication can be used to create the greatest killing, the most effective killing machine, murder machine that mankind has ever known. The mission of both cultures to cover the animalistic nakedness in man. Both were destined to raise man to the level of the human and the godly and to subdue, by proper education, the influence of Cham, the hot-blooded roughneck who desires the animalistic nakedness. All of the history of the world till our day represents the constant struggle regarding the above prophecy.
Rabbi,
Yes.
in the perspective of today, when you read this, Greece was at the pinnacle of everybody's cultural outlook. And look in history, they've come and they've gone.
Yeah.
The German culture has come and it's gone,
Yeah.
etc. Spanish,
Yeah.
over the perspective from God's view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We can't see it when we're in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's right. You never know you're in a bubble when you're in the bubble. Yeah. The culture of Greece aroused the desire for logic, enlightenment, yearning for great ideas, and the opening of the spiritual life of a person through the contemplation of harmonious and beautiful essences of things, and by means of the control of his overwhelming desires. So did the culture of Greece develop a feeling of self-respect within man. It could arouse trust in oneself and give a person responsibility for the conduct of his life. In short, the spirit of Greece freed man from the chains which bound him, enlightened him with culture, beautified his spirit, filled him with joy of life. The spirit of enlightenment which emanated from Greece in its pure form never constituted a danger to the holy ways of Israel, inasmuch as Israel sees it as a contributing cause to the realization of its own destiny, namely the enlightenment of man and his improvement. Then it was always proper to bring into his tent the truth and the pure humanity associated with that spirit. So it's not inherently wrong, it's not inherently false, it's not inherently detrimental, but when it's there at the expense of anything that is spiritual, that doesn't allow, so when they're locked into there, not only does it freeze them, but they come with a vengeance onto the spiritual. So we're meant to appreciate the beauty of this incredible world that God has given us around us, and to rise up above the baser desires, but at the same time without that infusion of the godliness, of the spirituality, what he called the elevated, harmonious, the godly. We see where it leaves us empty, and we see where it can lead to. So I mentioned before, Reish Lakish explained the verse, Va'aretz haitu tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tahom. There's tohu, there's vohu, there's choshech, and the tahom. That refers to the 4 exiles. Choshech, darkness, refers to the Greek exile, which darkened the eyes of Israel with their decrees. They tried to take away the illumination that we have, the godliness. Lastly, what we mentioned before, exile while we are in the land of Israel. Again, the Sifsei Chaim, for time's consideration, we'll go right to the English. This time period is called the Greek exile. Exile does not refer to time only, where time periods when the Jews were exiled from the land of Israel. Normally exile means we're kicked out of the land, as was the case with the Babylonian exile. Exile is mainly the removal of the holy presence, the Shekhinah, occurring when the spiritual connection between God and the Jewish people is weakened or disconnected. All right? Realize for a moment, the Ramban explains the book of Shemot, Exodus, is the book of exile and redemption. Exile we know. It starts with going down to Egypt. What's the redemption that it ends with?
Sinai, the Torah?
No, that's in the middle. What's the redemption that it ends with?
Mishkan.
The Mishkan, with God's presence filling the Mishkan. What is redemption? That close connection to God. What is exile? Removal.
A disconnect.
Disconnect. When the spiritual connection between God and the Jewish people is weakened or disconnected. This comes about in situations where non-Jews rule over the Jews spiritually, and the Jews are influenced by their culture and behave according to the ways of the nations. Divining Yavan, Greece, as darkness opposes what is accepted in the world and what is known for the history of the Greeks, since the blossoming of enlightened human civilization was rooted in Greece. The development of philosophy, science, and culture and their dissemination from the Romans to the great empires that followed, including the Arab nations, all founded themselves in the wisdom of the Greeks. It remains the basis of culture and science today, yet the sages determined this worldview is darkness. Yavan is coined darkness. Since the Greeks were so scholarly, it was their intention to compete with the Torah's wisdom and with the Torah nation. The Maharal explains the Greeks wanted to destroy the special relationship of the Jews to the Torah, according to the principle that a strong nation is jealous of another strong nation, and therefore wanted to dispossess them of their Torah. In fact, since the Greeks were wiser than other cultures, they specifically viewed the Jewish nation as a threat to their stature. Their goal was to translate the Torah into Greek, that's called the Septuagint, and to transform Judaism into a subculture of Greece. Right? So, Ida, you said before, right, the strong nation is jealous of another strong nation. We were not a physically, militarily strong nation, but in terms of our ideas, we were a very strong nation. And that's the battle that we have today. So the battle of Chanukah, the battle of the Galus Yavan, is something that we all battle with on a daily basis. And in one word, I would say that is disconnect.
Can one be in exile in Israel?
They were. They were in exile. They were in exile in Israel with the Beit HaMikdash standing. And that is our struggle as we are involved in the world. And involved in a very, very beautiful world. Although there's a lot of ugliness cropping up here and there. It is a very beautiful world, but we have to make sure that we infuse that world with the godly. We appreciate the incredible things and we make our brachot, our blessing, recognizing that it's from God. That is the struggle of the Greek exile, the struggle of Chanukah, and the struggle we have today is, again, in one word, battling that disconnect and making sure that our lives, as rich as they are, as wonderful as they are, as fulfilling as they are, to make sure that we are connected and that we are uplifting it with our connection to Hashem, to the Torah, to Am Yisroel. When we're left with just the exterior, then it is shvichat dam. It is the spilling of the lifeblood. And we've seen where that road takes the world, and we've seen the effects that when we take that road, that it has on the Jewish people. When we light our Chanukiot, we have to make sure that we are kindling that eternal light of our people and of ourselves. Yes, Janet?
Sorry. The other exiles, what's the correspondence say to Avodah Zarah, to the idolatry, all the other parts?
I'm not sure. I have to look back to that medrash.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Dov, thank you very much. Okay, yeshikoach everybody, those who had their Suda at the bench together.